Marisa, this is a pleasure. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here having this conversation with you.
I am too. I really am too. And I love that you said just recently, or you said before we started recording, that you're just so excited to um for the cold weather because you're wearing a sweater because you live in
I'm in
California.
California. Yeah. I we didn't have a fall and I hope we have a winter, but I don't know. It's still
Well,
sort of warm here.
if it wasn't a pandemic, if we weren't in the middle of a global pandemic, I would say come to Minnesota and experience it for yourself because it's freezing and
Is
I'm
it?
living in wool sweaters. And right now I'm wearing two pairs of socks and sitting with a blanket around me. So
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I'm not going to complain because it is definitely comfortable here. So I try not to complain, but
oh
it's
man.
nice to have that change sometimes.
I totally get that. Yeah, it totally is. But I'm just so excited that you're here. And I don't even know exactly how I connected with you first on Instagram, but that's how it happened. You have an awesome Instagram following. And I was like, this woman's doing it. And it makes me so excited. Um, Back when I wasn't a healthy person, I would play the comparison game, you
Mm,
know, and I would get into my head of like, oh, they're doing these things and oh my gosh. And man, I'm so glad that I'm not living there because we're all on the same mission of bringing hope to people that are experiencing divorce. And unfortunately, that's something that we've both experienced. But how cool that we're sitting here and we're able to bring hope to other people. It's wild, right?
it is wild. I could so relate to that being in that comparison
Yeah.
mode. Before I did a lot of work to heal through my divorce, I was definitely living in that place and we
Yeah.
probably wouldn't have been having this conversation. So I'm grateful that both of us are not living in that place anymore, that there's no
Right?
lack, right?
Exactly. Exactly. There is abundance. And yeah, so I just really I don't want to waste any more time. I mean, obviously that wasn't a waste of time, but I really want to dive in and have you share your story of the pain that you experienced of your divorce and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. My divorce was in 2012, so it's been 8 years now, almost 9 years now, and it was I experienced a very. I mean, I think all divorce is difficult,
Yeah.
but the reason why my situation, I feel like I always describe it as a very entangled divorce
Mhm.
because my ex and I both come from Italian families and we've both known each other before we started even dating. So our families knew each other from birth. So we started dating at 16 and 17 and we just sort of became a mesh, right? We celebrated everything together. All of our families, we all sort of knew each other. And, in the Italian culture, we sort of live by this belief of like, what do people think about us? How do they see us? Image is like everything in the Italian culture.
Hmm.
And so both of us sort of had these same values.
Yeah.
And, when got to this place where I wanted out of the marriage, it got really ugly. Like, because I wanted out of the marriage, I sort of took a lot of the backlash of asking for the divorce. And because it was not
Hmm.
acceptable in our culture, and the first thoughts were, okay, what are people going to say about us, and what are they going to think about my
Right.
daughter? And before that point, I sort of was living like this checklist life of, who does Marisa need to be, and who's acceptable, and being sort of the good girl, and making sure that
Yeah.
I lived up to the expectations, right? You can relate to that of my family. And
Yeah.
so because of that, that's how I chose a partner based on what is
Hmm.
acceptable, and is my family gonna like him, and all this sort of stuff, and not really
Right.
like sort of disconnected to what
Huh.
it was that I want and who I was. Because when you're living outside of yourself, when you're living a checklist life, you're not living your life, right? You're living
Yeah.
life for somebody else.
Right.
And so
And you
check box.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to interrupt,
Yeah,
but even to, you may not even know who you are. You may not even have an idea of that. And
yeah,
I don't know what it's like to grow up in the Italian culture, but in my faith, in my Christian walk, it was like very much that. That's at least
right,
how I was perceiving it. That
right.
it's about doing all these good things and like, checking the boxes and everything like that. And how it kind of appears out there, and that's so false. It's all just such an illusion.
Right. It's sort of like living outside your life
Yeah,
and allowing other people to pull the strings and never really
yeah,
going within yourself and asking, what do I want? Like you're
right.
sort of a spectator. I sort of became a spectator in a life that I let everybody else dictate
Hmm.
for me. And that sort of spilled into my marriage.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got to this, it was about my mid 30s when I got to this place that was so uncomfortable because I didn't recognize who I was anymore. I
Hmm.
didn't even know what I liked, who I was, why I
Yeah.
was here, what my purpose was, because I was living life for everybody else. And I just sort of had like this identity crisis, in my mid 30s, where I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore.
Mhm.
And like what's the point? I just felt like, well, and I had two children at the time, and I don't want to negate the fact that my children are a blessing to me. Like some people might think, well, how can you say that? You have two children, like is it like that's your purpose, is to be a mom? But this disconnection didn't come from anything outside of me. It was sort of deep rooted within, because I wasn't living my truth. I
Right.
wasn't living the truth of who I was. I was living this sort of facade, because I was living what everybody else needed me to be. And so there I was also creating fake connections and fake relationships
Hmm.
because I wasn't standing in a place of who Marisa is, that truth.
Yeah.
And it was because of who I needed to be. I was sort of drawing in these relationships based on that. So I was
Yeah.
having counterfeit connections with other people.
Hmm.
I was living a career in real estate for 15 years that I didn't love. So it sort of spilled into every area of my life. The kind of mom that I was,
Right.
the partner that I was, the career that I had, the friendships that I had, was all, it sort of felt, very distant, until I got to this place of feeling so uncomfortable that I just started questioning some of these beliefs, and that sort of set the wheels in motion. Like I realized at that point that my marriage was built on quicksand,
Hmm.
and that it didn't have a solid foundation. There was no connection, and because of that, I drew a partner who was also living in a place of lack. So we both sort of needed each other to make us
Hmm.
feel a certain way, to make us feel whole. And so the relationship became very needy and very reliant and very codependent.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I sort of describe it as living inside this cage. And it was, not until I got to that uncomfortable place where my spirit was like, okay, Marisa, like you can't do this anymore. Like I hear your internal struggles, I hear your cries, and I hear your call to experience freedom, to experience not freedom from not wanting to be in a relationship, but freedom to be more of who I was.
Right. Yeah.
And if you want to experience that, you're I wasn't going to be able to do it in the container of this relationship. And so
Right.
that's
And
when.
yeah, it's just so interesting when we live our life by the definition and um by the description of what people say of us or what our circumstances say of us. So you're a wife, you're a mom, you're a realtor, you are a homeowner, all these things. You're a dog mom, whatever it is. And then when those things are taken away, or when you finally realize that they're not what you thought they were, it can be so devastating to your identity if
Yeah,
that's where your identity is placed. It's like we
yeah,
need to have our identity so firmly placed in who we are,
right,
regardless of our circumstances, regardless of what people say about us. Because
absolutely.
if you lose your job, or God forbid you lose your kids or something, you're not your identity isn't shaken from being a mom. And it's the same thing
Oh yeah.
when you place your identity in being a spouse.
Absolutely. I can, yeah, definitely. I can so relate to that because we want so much to attach to these labels, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, I'm a mom, I'm a wife. And then the minute, I asked for a divorce and I sort of set the wheels in motion. And now here I am with two children. And now I'm not able to have my children
Hmm.
100% of the time. And
Yeah.
that because I was so attached to that label,
Yeah.
because I didn't know who I was, that triggered me. So
Oh,
when
I'm
my
sure.
children weren't with me and I didn't have like because I needed them. I needed
Yeah.
them to make me feel whole and to make me feel safe and I needed them to show me who I was.
Hmm.
And so, my eldest son who's now 19, he's sort of my biggest teacher because at he was 14 years old and he wanted to leave the house
Yeah.
because he wanted to live with his dad full time. There was so many reasons that sort of surrounded that decision, but um, what I learned from that, because it did trigger me, because I went into the story of I'm a horrible mom. What
Yeah.
child wants to leave the home? Like, who am I? Like, what are people
What
going
are
to
people
think
gonna
about
say?
me? What are they going to say?
Who?
What kind of mother, right? So all of those limiting beliefs, because I was so attached to that label. And then when he left, it literally, it took me down for a long
Oh
time.
my
Like
gosh.
it was more devastating than divorce itself. Like if you can
Really?
imagine.
Wow.
Yeah,
I mean, and having the label of being a mom or like owning that label is not a bad thing. Like
right,
that's a beautiful thing because if you actually are detached to being a parent, I mean, there's something also under there that can be, that probably needs to be repaired and healed as well if you're
right,
feeling so detached by that. But what you're saying is it really goes to where you place your value. And
right. So it was sort of like the minute I felt rejected by my son, right? I
oh,
felt
and so that was probably
rejected.
triggering to
It
the
he
other
triggered,
rejection.
and it
Yeah.
wasn't about my son, it was
No,
about
it
me.
never is.
He Right. Well, and at first, of course, you go into the story of
Yeah.
all the limiting beliefs that you carry. What I realized, what he showed me, was that there was still unhealed wounds that
Wow.
still were not healed. I mean, these were childhood wounds. They were not wounds because of him. They were not wounds because of my divorce.
Yep.
It was childhood trauma that got dragged into the relationship, got dragged into my parenting. And so when I felt rejected by him, I felt unworthy, right? If I'm not like here I am like still mourning my relationship and now my son is rejecting me as well. And so he triggered those wounds of me not loving myself
Right.
unconditionally. And so what my son taught me is that just because he wanted to go there, because whatever it was, right, he decided that that was the best choice for him and I had to honor that. But that doesn't mean, but I can still love myself unconditionally in the process. Just because my son isn't under my roof 100% of the time does not mean that I'm not his mother, does
Yeah.
not mean that I shouldn't be loving him unconditionally. Even when someone rejects you, right? When you're in your darkest time, in your darkest place, in that darkest hour, to still love somebody unconditionally, which is how God loves us, right?
Yeah.
That was a true testament to me of like, wow, like this is love. That is true love. To
Right.
love somebody even when they reject you, even when they
Yes.
don't want to be with you, even when they want to divorce you,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
To still have that unconditional love,
Yeah.
because unconditional love doesn't have conditions.
Yeah.
I'm not going to only love you when you do A, B, and C, only when you make me feel worthy as a mother.
Yeah.
Then I'll love you. Because what I was doing instead was punishing him. I
Hmm.
was punishing him because, oh, you don't want to be here with me? Fine. Let's go at it. Let's go. I'm going to
Yeah.
show you what you're missing. I'm going to make you feel my pain. I was in this place where I wanted everybody to feel my pain.
Yeah.
I wanted his dad to feel my pain. I wanted my family and friends and him to feel my pain. And I wanted to punish because I was in this place of such deep lack that I wanted to drag everybody down with me.
Right.
And what I told my son, and obviously we've done lots of healing since then, and we've come to a place where I was like, wow, like you really, really hurt me, and but you made me go into those deep, dark shadow sides of myself
Yeah.
that
Ooh.
still weren't healed, and that that was the biggest lesson that I could have ever learned in this lifetime, really, up until this point, is because he taught me not only how to love him unconditionally, but
Mhm.
to love myself first unconditionally.
Whew, that's so, I mean, that's so powerful. And you said so much there. It was so good. But you said that that was even more, going through this with your son was even more painful than your divorce itself. And
Yeah.
that's really interesting that you say that. I've heard many people say something similar about a disappointment that came after divorce,
Mm,
of maybe it was a bad breakup, maybe it was, or the loss of a job, but that just brings up this other level
mm,
of what needs to be healed and what needs to be restored. It's like, oh, we think that we're doing pretty good, but then we get a setback and we think we're even further back than we actually are, which isn't true.
right. I think
But
just get, because you think, oh, I went through a divorce. Okay, that was so painful. There's not going to be anything more painful than this. And
yeah,
so you don't do the work to still heal the wounds there, right? We don't want to look at it. We want to blame other people for why we feel this way. If I could blame my ex for making
yeah.
me feel this way, it's your fault I feel this way. It's your fault my son wants to leave the home. This is your doing.
Hmm.
And although, and I want to speak to all the women, sure, maybe there are people that are intentionally in your life trying to hurt you, right? We've all, or you feel painful
Yeah.
experiences. I don't want to negate the fact that we all have pain that we've had to endure, but what my son was showing me was my work. I had to own that, because if I sat in that, I could have been sitting in that victim place of, well, you helped my son move out of the home, you didn't support me as a
Yeah.
mom, you sort of rallied with him to leave the home, whatever the story was that I was saying out loud, right? Instead of saying, you know what is my part in this? And how can I take ownership in this? And what can I learn and heal from this? Because it's not, we're so stuck in keeping score, right? We want to keep score. You did this to me, I'm going to punish you. You took my son away, so therefore I'm going to do something to you.
Yeah.
And you keep that energy going, right? It's sort of, you keep attracting more of these situations
And it's
into your
so
life.
easy in divorce,
Oh yeah.
particularly when there's kids
Oh yeah.
or when you're dividing assets or something. I mean, it's so easy to play that game. Oh, you took the table. Well, I'm going to take the, I mean, you could just go back and forth
Right.
and
Well,
yeah,
kids keep you attached. So when you don't have children, and not to say that it's not hard, of course it's hard, but when you have to, like, I could divorce my spouse, right? But I couldn't stop being my son's mother. No
exactly.
matter what he did, I'm still and will forever be his mom, no matter where he is, no matter what day or time or any of that. So for me, it was a lesson that I couldn't run away from, right? I could just say divorce my spouse and just say, I'm done with this
Yep.
relationship. It's not serving me. Let me move on. But when it comes to these situations where you have to, I couldn't run from it, right? I had
Right.
to face it
Exactly.
dead on. There was no running away. So I had to sit with that, and I had to
Yeah.
feel it. And was it painful? Absolutely. Absolutely, it's painful. I don't know
Yeah.
anything more painful than feeling like you're losing your child,
Oh
and
my gosh.
but I want to, speak to anybody who's having this experience, that you're not losing anything, because what you're gaining is unconditional love, learning how to love that person
Hmm.
unconditionally, even in spite of them triggering you, right?
Yeah.
Because that's your lesson. If you can love him, it doesn't matter where he was. He taught me a very valuable lesson that nobody, nobody
Right.
was able to teach me but him.
Wow. That's, I mean, that's really powerful. And it sounds also like you were learning how to love your ex-husband too. And I'm a firm believer that love doesn't just disappear after divorce. It's meaningful, it's important, but it shifts and it changes after divorce or after a breakup or whatever. And we just have to learn how to love differently. And love often means strict boundaries
Right.
and, just holding those things too. So I would love
Absolutely.
to hear how this lesson with your son, how that transferred to being able to love your ex-husband in a very different way than you did obviously when you're married.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, that's a hard place. That's a
Yeah.
hard place to be in when you feel like things have been done to you or there's a lot of pain or hurt. And you're not going to just jump through without feeling that. There's no escaping that. We're human and we have to feel those emotions because we can't avoid it, right? So
Yep, exactly.
that's part of the experience. And how I sort of had to get to this place of forgiveness because what I realize is that we're all carrying our own wounds, right? We're all these wounded children that don't feel good enough, right? If we attracted each other and I chose this person as my partner and we sort of attracted each other based on where we were energetically, we both had wounds underneath the surface, right? So I had to sort of connect to him at a different level of, okay, you know what? Not all of us are carrying wounds, and that doesn't make him any different, right? He sort of has the wounds too, and so you get to a place of having compassion
Yeah.
that we're not our behavior, right? So whatever has been done to you, we're not that. That's not who we are. At the deepest level of
Yeah.
all of us is we're a spirit, we're a soul, right? And so I had to sort of connect to that. And to be honest, my middle brother is the one who sort of taught me that.
Mm.
I wasn't supported at all in my divorce. Like my family didn't support me. They just couldn't understand why they saw this marriage on the outside. It looked so picture perfect. Like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you want out? Because I never spoke any word of it, right? I contained this unfulfillment. I contained that. And because in my culture, you don't speak bad. You don't talk
Hmm.
bad about your husband, your relationship, your baggage, right? That you keep that behind closed doors. So I
It's a
never,
recipe for shame right there.
right. So I
Or
sat
it
in this
can be.
place, right. I sat in this place by myself containing this and I just didn't speak anything. And so of course my family thought, what the heck are you talking about?
You're
Like, what do you
crazy.
mean? Right. You're nuts.
Yeah.
19 years you've been with this person, you have this life together. Like something has to be going on. Like you lost your mind. Right. And so one of my brothers, he just couldn't understand it. He sort of took it personal, like as if I were to divorce him. And there was a lot of damaging things that were said about me and they sort of landed on my children's ears. And I sort of had to walk through fire to get out of this relationship. Like I said, the support did not come from my family. So my brother, he's again everything is a lesson. It was, what do I need to get out of this? And my brother did say a lot of damaging things, and it was so damaging that in my world, my brother was dead to me. That's how
Oof.
bad it was. Like, you were dead. He was sort of a part of the catalyst of why my son wanted out of the home. And it was just, in my eyes, it was unforgivable. And I was sort of holding on to this pain story, right? And, I was here mourning my marriage ending. I was mourning the fact that my family couldn't support me. I was mourning the things that were being said about me, and I sort of was carrying this grief. And I'm like, you know what, I need to talk to somebody about this. And so I was seeing a counselor, and this was about 2 years after I asked for a divorce.
Yeah.
And the counselor sort of walked me through this meditation. And in this meditation, I had an experience. I was brought back to a memory of my family when I was about 6 years old. And I've told my brother this story. He knows all about it. And in this meditation, it was my two brothers, my parents, and I. And we were in Italy on vacation, and we were visiting relatives. But we were all walking together, and my older brother and my dad were walking behind me, and they sort of had this bond, like he was the oldest son, and they were very bonded, right? And then me and my mom were walking in front of them, and we were holding hands, and I'm the baby girl, the only girl, right? So the four of us were in communion, right? And then my older brother, the middle brother, who I had this experience with, who I was estranged from, I was
Okay.
not talking to him. He was sort of on the outskirts near us, jumping up and down and trying to get everybody's attention. And nobody stopped to turn at him. It was as if he were a ghost.
Huh.
And I sort of had this experience as if I was in my brother's body, experiencing what he was feeling. And every time I talk about this, it sort of makes me emotional, because what I was feeling is this little boy that had never been seen or
Mhm.
heard in our family. And I realized that his experience was not the same as my experience. And I
Yeah.
sort of I imagined his feelings being my son's feelings. And I just started bawling during this meditation. I sort of
Wow.
was crying because I was like, wow, like, what I realized, it's not about me. Like,
Yeah.
the minute I disconnected from my ego, right? That pain story, that pride, you did this to me, you hurt me, right? My ego, I got into my spirit, into his spirit, and I realized he's just a wounded child. And only wounded children hurt other wounded children.
Hmm.
Only people that are in pain would hurt somebody else.
Yeah.
And so that sort of taught me about forgiveness.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
this other level of forgiveness that you experience when you can have compassion over somebody and say, hurt people. So there must be something under their surface here. I mean,
Right.
that's a powerful thing to learn
It was,
and a
yeah,
painful one to do, especially after this experience with your family. I mean, this sounds like it was almost slanderous
yeah.
and really, really, really hard. And I
It
mean,
was
I
hard. Yeah.
yeah, and you're talking about it now, but like you're removed from it because you've been healed.
Right.
But that's not to negate the pain that you walked through in it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's I mean there's people that are walking this story and holding the pain, living in the pain story like you're saying. And that's okay to be there for a little bit
Right.
when you're living it, but then to release it like you're saying. I mean that's a powerful thing.
Yeah.
So hard, but so important because that frees you to
Yeah.
actually
And so
heal.
that's what I want to say, is because that's an important message that you just said. Because I always have women saying, but my ex did this to me and he hurt me and he was abusive. And so I'm never going to forgive that. And what I realized is, I wasn't ready to let it go either in that point. I was
Yep.
still processing, right? I still had boundaries.
Yep.
But I actually reached out to my brother and told him of my experience. This is what happened. I'm so sorry if I played any part in this family of not seeing you or not being there for you.
Mhm.
And I take ownership of that. So no matter what you did, I'm going to take ownership of my part. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to allow you in my life to hurt me, right? So
Right.
to that woman who's sitting in that story, that doesn't excuse, it doesn't mean you need to let this person back into your life. But what I experienced after I had that conversation with my brother is sort of the poison of the unforgiveness release out of my body, right? That was done for me. That
Yes.
release and that forgiveness was done for me. It wasn't done for my brother. It wasn't done for my family. It wasn't done for anyone. What I did was release myself from prison and freed myself. Does that
Exactly.
mean that I allow this person to come in and do bad behavior? Absolutely not.
No.
You still have to protect yourself from being, if you're not loved unconditionally and you're in a place where somebody is harming you, yeah, you put those boundaries up. You don't,
Absolutely.
that doesn't mean you imprison, you hold yourself hostage, right?
Yeah, that's so, so true. Because, like I said, love means boundaries a lot
Right,
of times. I don't remember who it was, but somebody said unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
right, right.
And that is just, isn't
Powerful.
that true? But it feels so much like we're doing it for them.
Right,
Like
right.
if I'm
And we're
holding
like, no, we're
this,
not letting you off the hook that easy. Yeah.
yes. And something that I love as well, that really ties into so much of what you speak about on social media. And then I know that you have your coaching program and all that stuff. But just this idea about being spiritually and emotionally married while you're
Mm,
divorced.
right, right.
And I would love for you to talk about that a little bit because I think that ties into what we're talking about here, like with your brother and with your son. And obviously, you weren't married to those people,
Right,
but
right.
how does that translate to those individuals who are still saying, "Oh, my ex-husband did this," or, "Oh, he," I get that. Like, yeah, it's true. There's so many things that happen around divorce and painful things that are said and abuse that still continues after a marriage is legally ended.
Mm.
But tell me about this idea about being emotionally married when
Yeah.
you're actually legally divorced.
Yeah, I call it energetically married, right? You could be divorced, and like you said, it doesn't have to just be your with your ex. It could be with anybody that that has control over you, right?
Yeah.
So you could be divorced but still energetically married. And what I mean by this is because I think a lot of us women or people, we're delusional because we think, oh, we're gonna just sign divorce papers and that's gonna just make this nightmare go away, right? I'm going to be free. I'm going to get my freedom back. And you realize at some point that if you don't heal the trauma and heal what got you to that unconscious place, if you don't do the work to take ownership, you can still be in this energetic marriage. So don't
Yes.
let papers fool you, right? And so again, I don't know what it is, but apparently I need to embody every experience myself before I can speak of it. So
Oh, same.
right?
Same.
I come from the school of hard knocks
Yeah.
where I have to learn the hard way, and that's okay. That's okay. I'm
And so
grateful for
listen to us and don't make the mistakes we made.
don't make the mistake. I made the mistake for you,
Yeah.
so let me give you the information. So how did
I
I
made it
learn
too.
that?
I'm here. I'm here. I'm taking ownership. Like,
Right? We're both
I
raising
made
our
it too. Yeah.
So how I learned this was, my divorce was not amicable at all. We ended up in the court systems, back and forth, multiple times. So it was exhausting, right? It was a lot of work to sort of release myself and, all part of the experience. I had to be the one to let go. So it was, again, it was all surrounding the time that I had this experience with my brother. It was 2 years after my divorce again. There was a lot of stuff still lingering that was
Mhm.
still underneath the surface. So what happened is, we ended up back in court after a few years after the divorce was finalized, and for my son. And I was sitting here where I am right now at my desk in my office, and I had an email that was sent to me from my ex, and it was not a good email. And so as I was reading this email, I started seeing what this email was doing to my body, right? I
Yep.
started having this reaction. This volcano started erupting inside of me where all these emotions, I lost it. Like I
Yep.
lost my mind. I sort of went into this rage, and it was that simple from reading an email. And I sat there and I sort of stepped back and I was just like, whoa, Marisa, like you're still married to this person.
Hmm.
This person still has ownership of you. You're
Yeah.
divorced, you're living in two separate homes, you're in two separate cities, and this person still has the power to drop you to your knees by an email. I mean, when are you going to learn? When are you going to
Yeah.
learn to stop giving your power away? And so it was then that I realized, okay, I need to get a grip on this. I need to get my power back. I need to detach from this marriage, energetically detach. And I need to take my power back. And that was sort of that was sort of like an awakening that I needed.
Mhm.
But how do you do that, right? There's sort of a whole process that you can't. It's one thing just knowing it, and it's
Yep.
another thing, okay, what do I do?
Right,
How do
because
I do that?
you can't stuff it. When those
No.
feelings come up, because they will if you're still, as you say, energetically married, or I mean, this is like the same as being spiritually married, that just because you're signing papers doesn't mean that there is the total severing of your hearts entwined, because a marriage is a miracle. You are
Right.
exchanging vows in front of God, in front of other people, to one another, and and your lives completely change. It doesn't matter if you've been living together for 20 years. When there is a marriage, there is a miracle. And I firmly believe that. And so it's not as simple
Right.
as signing papers to bring a divorce about. I love that you're saying that, and to say, wow, something needs to shift here,
Yeah.
but it's not about stuffing it. When those feelings come up, we can't just say, okay, I'm not going to feel that and I'm just going to avoid that
Right,
forever.
avoid it, yeah.
No, but
Just
it's
look at
about,
your body's gonna tell you everything you need to know, right? Get out of your head,
isn't our body
forget
amazing?
your body, yeah, your body's gonna get
Yes.
tightness of chest,
Yep.
right? Breathing heavy, anxiety,
Yep.
your everything is gonna explode, and that's a sign of, "Wow, what am I doing?" Forget what the email or the text or the phone call, forget what that said, right? Step back and be like, the reason you feel reactive like that is because you have given your power away to somebody else, right? And nobody does that. You allow that to happen. You handed that over on a
Yeah.
gold plate. Like you said, attachment, you bonded with this person, your souls
You're
bonded in the most
supposed to.
intimate ways, right?
Yeah, you're supposed to.
Right. Right. And so
That's what
so
marriage
divorce
is.
papers aren't gonna, the courts
No.
aren't gonna sever that for you.
No, your attorney is not going to sever that
Right.
for you.
Right.
And your therapist or counselor is not going to do that for you.
Right.
You have to do that work.
Right, right. You have to
Whew.
be very intentional,
Yeah.
very intentional. Number one, be intentional about gaining control of your body and your emotions and start processing the emotions. Why do I feel this way? What limiting belief is underneath the surface that I'm allowing this person to make me react? Why do
Mhm.
I feel reactive? Why do I
Yeah.
feel so start asking some deep rooted questions, and those answers aren't going to come on anything on the outside of you.
Yeah.
They're always within yourself. So go within yourself
Hmm.
and have these deep rooted conversations that are going to reconnect you back to your spirit, right? You already have the answers inside. You got to just sit long enough to listen, right?
Yeah.
To what that is and be honest about it.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of journaling,
Yeah.
in getting these things out because sitting with them in just inside of us, we can actually get into more of an anxious spiral
Mhm.
with some of those things of why is my body reacting this way and why am I feeling this way? But for me, I love a list. I love to
Yeah.
see things on paper. So the
Mhm.
power of journaling, what you're saying, it's just like
Yeah.
taking the ownership, beginning to notice those triggers, beginning to notice a pattern in our life and in our thoughts, and then in the emotions that come after those thoughts. Who it's
Yeah.
powerful.
I
Yeah.
love journaling. I love journaling is free therapy. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, I mean, it's like,
everyone
it's
should
like
journal,
8.99 for the journal, but
right? You can even go to the 99-cent store and get a
yeah,
notebook, right?
who's
There's no
stopping you?
excuse. Get a journal. I have so many journals that are
Oh,
around
same.
they're everywhere in my house. And that, yeah, I never
Yeah.
used to journal until I was going through a separation. Then I was just like, you know what? I need to gain some awareness around this and get some clarity. And, journaling it could be an art form. The minute
Mhm.
you start writing down stuff, like your ego's going to want to say things, and he did this to me and blah, 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 blah. And that's okay. Like, let that all out. But
Yes.
eventually at some point, you're going to connect to the real voice, your true voice within. And that's where magic and power comes from. That's where the power is. It when you get out of the ego long enough, you start journaling, you connect to the spirit. And that's where you're going to find your truth.
Yeah, it's really cool to look back at my old journals to say, "Oh, man, I was in a totally different space." And
Right.
thank God I'm not there anymore. And then I can see my journals now and I mean, yeah, they're totally full of emotion at times
Yeah.
and anger even. I mean, that's completely okay.
Right.
The natural response to injustice is anger. Like anger
Right.
is fine,
Feel
but
it.
it's
Yeah.
what we're choosing to do with it.
Right.
And man, I would get so caught up in that in the emotions just running
Yeah.
running me
Yeah.
and
Well, so many people are taught that anger is not an emotion we're supposed to have, right? When we're little, our parents would be like, "No, stop! Feel like you don't feel
yep,
that, or
it's an
that's not okay." So,
uncomfortable
right,
emotion
it's
for
not
other people.
comfortable. You're making me uncomfortable. I don't know how to deal with this, so just be quiet. And so then we bottle the anger, right, and
Yep.
it comes out at the most opportune times.
Uh,
So we have to, like, yeah, we have to definitely feel that. It's okay.
mhm.
It's part of
Yes,
being human, right?
and it's part of the healing process too. I
Yeah.
really, really believe that, but what you're saying is that in getting those things out there, in an external source, or even just in your mind, even if you're just talking to yourself, that's totally fine. We
Yeah.
love journaling,
Yeah.
but just getting it out of your head in a way is a powerful way of beginning to untie those knots, which
Yeah.
is another thing that you talk about. I mean, this is that kind of encompasses so much of what we're saying, of that, this idea of untying these knots of
Right.
divorce and even of marriage, untying the knot. I mean, when you say you get married, you're like, oh, you tied the knot, but
Right.
that's what that's what happens when we go through a divorce. So would you speak
Yeah.
about that just a tad? And that was
Yeah.
also, I mean, you even said too, kind of at the beginning, that your marriage was so entangled with other people and with your family and with his family and all, and your culture and all that stuff. That probably
Yeah.
goes around
Entangled.
this.
Right. Right. I was very entangled in that sort of, I describe it as just because I was living this life for everybody else and these
Mhm.
expectations and these sort of limiting beliefs that I carried into my relationship, and not ever asking if that was serving my life or if those were even true. Like, these are all sort of the knots that we create. I didn't have boundaries. Like, my boundaries in my family were non-existent. Like, there, what do you mean boundaries? Like,
We're family.
yeah, like, no, we go into everything. Oh, you're getting a divorce, I need to throw myself in that too. Like, no, like, so I had to, and I get that it feels uncomfortable because part of we're the good girls, so we tell ourselves we don't want to hurt other people, right? We don't want to
Yeah.
say no. We don't want to put boundaries out there because we're being mean or hurtful. But
Yeah.
what you have to realize is at the cost of hurting yourself. And
Mhm.
do you want
Whew.
that? So untying the knots for me is untying the limiting beliefs that you've carried, right? Looking at the generational trauma that
Mhm.
you've brought into your relationship, looking at that baggage, because a lot of the stuff that we bring is not ours, and we never stop to question that. So, looking at the fear, looking at these judgments and criticisms, not having these boundaries. So, like, you have to be able to release yourself from all of that, right?
Yeah.
Release yourself from the victim story, release yourself from the need to defy, defend, prove yourself worthy. Prove yourself worthy as a mom, as a
Mhm.
woman, right? As a wife, like any of that, as a daughter, and really step into the truth of who you are. So, I call it butterfly magic. So the magic happens for the butterfly when it goes inside that cocoon, right? And it's painful and it's
Mhm.
uncomfortable. And we don't want to look at some of this stuff. And we don't want to sit in the quiet, right? Right now we're in a pandemic. We don't want to sit in this stillness. We're
Yeah.
not okay with that. We don't know how to do that. And when you release that, when you do the work, that's when the butterfly is able to
Mm.
emerge, right, and transcend and evolve out of that,
Yeah.
right? So, but the butterfly doesn't anticipate that the beauty that it is, so it has to go through that transformation. So
Yeah.
that is part of the process. The pain is part of the process. You have to
Yeah.
be willing to look at some of that stuff. And if you don't, what is that going to look like? You're going to continue to attract the same experiences. You're going to
Mhm.
attract the same partner because you still have the same limiting beliefs, the same fears, the same, cage that you've put yourself in. And if you don't take yourself out of that,
Yeah.
you're going to just recreate it over and over again. And that's what happens, right? Because we expect somebody else to come in and fix it. We
Right.
expect somebody else to make us happy,
Yeah.
to do the work for us, when in reality, nobody can do that for you.
Yeah.
Your kids can't do it for you. Your partner can't do it. Your parents can't do it. Your friends. You have to take ownership and do the work.
It's so, so true. And I love what you're saying about, you're just going to attract you're going to attract the same thing. You're going to attract that pain. I talk a lot about rebound relationships on this podcast and in my community and that kind of thing, because it can be such a detrimental experience that is so incredibly common. Rebound is like, the buzz term for it, but really
Right.
what it is it does not matter how long it has been since your marriage or relationship broke down, but it's trying to meet that need that you have, trying to get that validation from someone else when your heart is still in pain.
Mm,
And far too many people walk through that. I would say around 75% of people that I talk to that have experienced divorce have walked through a rebound relationship. And those are just
yeah,
people that have told me. So
right.
I can't
Well,
even
think about the
imagine.
divorce rate for second marriages, right? That's why they're
Yes.
higher. Right.
Exactly, exactly. Because it's what is it,
It's like 60
60%?
to 65%. Yeah.
Yeah, and then third marriage is at 72%.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
mean, so it's absurd, but it makes sense
Right.
because we don't want to go into that cocoon and do that work, and we really don't wanna do the hard work of busting out of it
Mm.
because that's painful and it's hard, and we just want somebody to help us become a butterfly. But we got we I mean, it's hard, hard, hard work,
It
but
is hard work, yeah. But we're not here to be comfortable, right? And we're
exactly.
not here to just sit in stillness or be stagnant. We're forever growing, evolving, moving.
Yeah.
I always say still waters bring malaria. So like, do you want to just sit
Oh,
in
dang.
stillness and die, or do you want to grow? Because if you want to be happy, you have to do the work to
Yeah.
grow and evolve. You can't expect somebody else
You
to
can't
come
expect
in
someone else to
and
do
do
it.
it for you. It's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's delusional. So do the work and get uncomfortable. This is your life. Like, you get to be the co-creator of your life and
Yeah,
design the life you want, but you have to be an active participant, right?
totally.
You can't just sit around waiting.
And there is a moment where you do need to be sitting. Like if you've just discovered an affair or if you are in the process of facing a divorce that you didn't want or something like that. I mean, sit in the pain. There is
Right.
there is free reign to be there for a hot minute.
Right.
It's okay to grieve and it's okay to sit there, but there comes a moment, which is what we're talking about, when we can't sit there too long.
Yeah.
Part of the healing process is being knocked to our butt. We're catching our breath,
Yeah.
because you've had the wind knocked out of you. So it is important to be sitting there. But what you're saying is, we're not staying there forever, and you're
Right.
not staying there for years, and you're certainly going to go further than you ever would if you were in that unhealthy place. And isn't
Right.
that the cool thing about this life, that we can take these obstacles, we can take these painful experiences, and they can become our launch point to actually be the person that God wants us to be the person that we're actually meant to be. And
Mm.
I love that. And I
Love
see
that.
that in your life, Marisa, because you've taken this obstacle, not just obstacle, but this painful experience and the painful experiences around the painful experience. And you've used it to firmly be established in who you are and who you're meant to be. And that's beautiful.
Thank you.
I just want to thank you so much
Thank you.
for
Thank
sharing
you
this
for that.
story, sharing your strong conviction. I just love hearing people with like real strong convictions, which is totally you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah.
So if people are, if people, I really want people to follow you on Instagram, follow what you're doing. So would you just share a little bit about that and where people can follow up with you if they'd like more
Yeah.
information?
Yeah. So Instagram is Marisa Lupo Coaching. And I also have a private Facebook community for divorced moms, and it's called Untying the Knots of Divorce. Or they can just go to my website, which is marisalupocoaching.com. So really
Perfect.
simple, and they can get in for there. I have blog posts on there, a lot of
Mhm.
articles, a lot of freebies. There's other resources, free resources on there. Get on the mailing list. So yeah, lots of ways to connect with me for sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Because your resources and your message are really, really important, especially for these moments of continuing to have those triggers, especially around our kids and having maybe a continual conversation and connection with an ex-spouse. And so I just think what you're doing is really, really important. So thank you so much. And
Oh,
thank you for
thank you
being
so
here.
much. Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm so happy to have connected with you.
Same. It's the best.
Uh,